Ois Vav. So even though the Rebbe explained before that nowadays the main avodah is milmato l'maylo, we have this Eretz Shiva Momim, and then we go to the Keni Knizi Kadmoni. But by Yaakov, it was the other way around. First, because he came milmaylo l'mato, that he had to first be mevarer Lavan, and then he can be mevarer Esau. So the Rebbe says, so why do we read in the Torah about the birur milmaila lamata when our avodah is milmata lamaila? And the Rebbe explains, in addition, that milmaila lamata that gives koyach to the avodah milmata lamaila, that it's in a sin of koyach, as the Rebbe just said. But there's actually also a birur milmaila lamata even in the time of the Golus right now, the chiluk between Torah and Tefillah. And then the Rebbe says that even though, and in Torah itself, there's the chiluk pnimis Torah, as the Rebbe is going to continue to explain. But first of all, it's horich lohavi. We need to understand Hare Torah he nitzchis. Torah is eternal. Chol hasipurim v'ha'oros Shabbat Torah heim ha'oros nitzchiyos. So all the lessons, the stories and the lessons of Torah are eternal lessons. So it's not only for that time when Yaakov lived, this avodah of milmayla lamata de birurim, first love and nesav, and now we're going to say it has no connection because now the connection is first the shiva momin and then keni knizi kadmoni. It's milmata lamayla. No, it's nitzchis. Umekiv sha'avodah achshav hi bederech milmata lamaylo, since the avodah now is in the way of milmat l'maylo, loma nichtav b'toiro barichas. So why has it been written in the Torah at length? Hasipur de Vayishlach Yaakov goimer elois, of the study that Yaakov sent to Esav, which is the Amshacha milmaylo l'matov. Now it's milmat l'maylo shetoichneu birur milmaylo l'mato, which is a bit of milmaylo l'mato. Why are we reading about it now? Which contents a biru milmai lamata? It must be that we have something from the biru milmai lamata today as well. And another proof, but even more needs to be explained. We need explanation. The Torah relates. Torah is eternal. Gam Seder Habirur the Yaakov also tells us about the order of Bir Yaakov, Habirut the Gimel Rishonis Lovon. First, the sorting out of the three, first one, the Keser Chochma Bina, which is Lovon. The Vnei Habirut the Zayin Tachtoinus Esav, before the sorting out of the lower one of Esav. So the Rebbe wants to bring out that even now we also have somewhat of that Milmai Lamata. So we can say the explanation. The Yaakov Avinu hoyo habirur b'derech milmai lamata. The fact that by Yaakov was the birur milmata, hu kichol ma'isa ovas shehem siman unesinas koich lebonim, which as all actions of our fathers are a sign, they give koich lebonim. Alavoida zugufa. So there is giving power. That avodah, the same avodah that the others did, which milmai lamata. Besides the fact that the koyach we get from their avodah milmai lamata, that we can do the avodah milmata lamayla, we also have a koyach, and we also have to do milmai lamata as well. Even though generally we said now is the avodah of milmata lamayla first design amomim and then keni kniz v'kadmei. Yashleim Rabbi, you say the explanation. The sheitzel Yaakov Avinu hoyo habiru b'derech milmaylo. Okay, b'hainu. That is the noise safal zeh shabiru the Yaakov b'derech milmaylo lamato. In addition to the fact that the biru of Yaakov from above to below hunisinas koyach ala biru b'derech milmato lamaylo, so that gives us power for the biru milmato lamaylo. So even though it's not the same biru, Yaakov is birur milmayla mata, but we are milmatla mata, but we get the koyach from Yaakov. In addition to ikar birur da'achshov, which is the main birur milmatla mata. Besides that, unisinas koyach gam aliyan habirur b'derech milmayla mata debonim. It also gives a power, the strength of the birur milmayla mata of the sons. Habirur shali de Torah, the birur that takes place through Torah. Torah versus Tefillah is called Memayla Lamata. And within Torah itself, Pnimius HaTorah is Memayla Lamata. But Torah Gufa, Habiru Shal de Pnimius HaTorah. The Pnimius HaTorah, that's the Memayla Lamata, and Nigla the Torah is Memat Lamayla. The Iker Inyan Habirur, B'derech Memayla Lamata, will be Pnimius HaTorah. The main idea of sorting out in a way of Mimayla Lamata is B'pnimis HaTorah. Is by Le'il B'dibra Maschel Podu B'Sholem Baruch, as explained earlier in the Mamer Podu B'Sholem at length. Da Birur Shal Yidei Nigla de Torah. Even though we say Lamata Lamayla, but how does the Birur of Nigla de Torah take place? You have to descend into the Gashmim into Tainis Sheker. It's Eitz Hadas Toivara. Mikivon Shenislapsha be'Eitz Hadas Toivara. Since the Torah dresses up in the Eitz Hadas of Toivara, good and bad, the level of the Eitz Hadas, it's a descent, therefore, for Torah. B'chdei levarer berurim, in order to be levarer berurim, udugmas habirur v'derech milmat lamaylo. So that's similar to the birur of milmat lamaylo. Bislapshus, dressed up, it's dressed up in a way of war. The Rebbe also explained that that's why we have questions and answers when we learn, even the style of learning of Nigla the Torah. As opposed to the birur, which takes place through the inner part of Torah, which ilono the chayo, that's the tree of life. She'eino melubeshes b'toivara. It's a tree of life. It's not Eitz Hadas, which is toivara. This is a tree of life. There's no toivara. Hushloi b'derech islapshus. That doesn't dress up. It's milmayla lamata. It's from above to below. So there is a koyach from Yaakov's avoida to the avoida of Torah, and within Torah specifically to the avoida pnimis HaTorah, which is mevared in a way of milmayla lamata. And the Rebbe goes on to say, while we just made a chiluk in between Nigla and Pnimius HaTorah, we also have within Pnimius HaTorah and within Nigla the Torah the two distinctions. The Rebbe Taka in that previous Maimir as well also talked about the two levels of Pnimius HaTorah. One, that we understand the Torah, and one of Terasa Shel Mashiach, in which we see Torah. But here, the Rebbe is going to talk about a very specific two aspects of Torah. Torah as it brings to action, and that means it's Torah as it impacts Lamata, and the Torah is just for the study itself. The same thing in Nigla, the Torah. You have what it does, the Berurim, specifically dresses up, and then there is the Rosh Hashanah. Let's look inside. Zayin. The above mentioned distinction, difference between the revealed part of Torah and the inner part of Torah is in a general way. Avol beprotius, but in a detailed way. Yesh bekol echad mehem shnei yonyon. So each one of them, both Nigla and Pnimius, each of them, Nigla and Pnimius, has Shnei Ha'inyonim, both Milmayla Lamata, Milmata Lamayla. So while generally we separated between Pnimius and Nigla, within Pnimius HaTorah we have Milmayla Lamata and Milmata Lamayla, and within Nigla the Torah. Ki Torah Klolus Protus Nemra, because Torah has the generality, quoting from the Gemara, and it also has the specifics. So when you talk about generally Torah, there's a difference between Nigla and Pnimius, that Nigla is considered Milmata L'mayla, and Chasidus Pnimius HaTorah Milmata L'mata. But in detail, the Rebbe explains now, both have both. The idea is, so first we're going to talk about Pnimius HaTorah, the two levels in Pnimius HaTorah. One, knowing godliness, that's L'mayla L'mata, and then godliness brings you to Av Yira. The Rebbe writes in Tanya, as the Alter Rebbe writes, Bal HaGeula, the Yutas Kislev, the master of redemption of Yutas Kislev. This Kislev was coming up at that Shabbos. This was not that Shabbos was coming during the week. This was Shabbos Yudalit Kislev, and Yutas Kislev was following the week. So this Shabbos, that my name is Baruch Kulu Yom Shalachro. This Shabbos, from it are blessed all the days that follow. Koilel Yom Hagula Yutas Kislev, which includes the day of redemption of Yutas Kislev. So the Alter Rebbe in the Tanya, right? So the Rebbe is referencing from the Alter Rebbe on the Shabbos that precedes Yutas Kislev from the Alter Rebbe, whose Yom Hagula is Yutas Kislev. So he writes in Tanya, he says two things. The Limud Pnimius HaTorah, learning of Pnimius HaTorah, he mitzvah Rama v'nisa. So he says it's a exalted and an elevated mitzvah, just learning Pnimius HaTorah. And the second thing is umevio, the leiv shalim, it brings you to a complete heart. I know that means the belimud Pnimius HaTorah shnei inyonim. We have two matters, two areas that we accomplish when we learn Pnimius HaTorah. Number one, it brings you to a complete heart. The inyan zeh Pnimius HaTorah, that aspect of Pnimius HaTorah shaykh libir hamidus, that has a connection to the sorting out of the midas. It's a connection to the midas. The second aspect in Pnimius HaTorah, shalimud va'yidiyah the Pnimius HaTorah mitzad atzmai, just learning and knowing Pnimius HaTorah on its own, hu mitzvah rama v'niso, it's exalted and raised a great mitzvah. Inyan Pnimius HaTorah shelamayla berurim. That would be the idea of Pnimius HaTorah, which is higher than sorting out. So you have the part that it's mislabish to bring about avdeu midos, and then you have the place which is higher, which is b'derech milmayla lamata, not b'derech milchama, not b'derech yislapshus, right? Which is the knowledge and the learning of the Pnimius HaTorah itself. Same thing is on the other hand is with Nigla the Torah. That is a little gissa. The same thing is on the other side with Nigla the Torah. Shagam Nigla the Torah yeshna minyanim shalamayla miyina berurim. That also in the revealed part of Torah there are aspects which are above berurim. Ukemoy, for example, halimud ba'ofen the drosh v'kabel schar. When it doesn't have a practical application, so you say learn, drosh, expound, and get reward just for expounding. You're learning Torah, but you have no practical application. It's not connected to action. So who? Benigla the Torah gufa. So within Nigla Torah itself, that's higher than birurim. That's one aspect in Nigla the Torah. And this idea, so in Nigla the Torah we have things that are connected to action, things that are not connected to action. Especially the Rebbe says in Torah Shebiksav, we have lessons, directions in Maisa, learning Torah understanding, and then we have learning the stories of Torah Shebiksav, which are higher. This idea that also in the revealed part of Torah there is the aspect which is higher than sorting out. This is more with emphasis in the written Torah. So we have like this. The limud that Torah should be learning Torah should be with understanding and grasping. Especially learning the lessons of Torah Shabbat, the mitzvahs in Torah Shabbat, and Hein Ba'alochas Torah Shabbat, whether it's the laws, Hein Ba'sipurim Shabbat. There's also, we learn from the stories, there are lessons. So these lessons part that we take from Torah Shabbat, those are connected to B'negei L'maisa, that are connected to action, Shaykh Linyan HaBirurim. That is connected more to Birurim, I guess, Lamata Lamaila, working on it. Masha'enkein, Limud HaSipurim, the Torah Shebiksav K'moshe Mitzad Atzma. Just learning them as they're on without taking the lesson from them. So, just learning Torah Shebiksav, that's also considered learning. Recitation, working on the words, Makol Shikein, Akri B'Torah Shebiksav. And of course, if you just read Torah Shebiksav, Shalamayla Masoga Lagamri, that you're not understanding at all, that's a learning which cannot be called connected to Maisa to Birur in a way of Islapshus. Because you're not going to say that he's wasting his time. Even if he's learning that he doesn't understand, even if he doesn't understand the meaning of the words, he's still fulfilling the mitzvah of Talmud Torah. So there's a part of story of the Torah, of Nigla the Torah, which is higher than understanding. It's not mislabish and birurim. Who kamoy pnimis haTorah shalamayla birurim. That's similar to pnimis haTorah, which is above birurim. So he says there is a parallel. There's a connection between the learning Torah, just the words of Torah in the Nigla of the Torah, with the inner learning of Torah, which is higher than birurim. As I explained, the Torah, the Pnimius HaTorah he bechlal shlish b'mikra. That the Pnimius HaTorah would be included in, person has to divide up 3 parts of learning. 1/3 goes Chumash, on a third is Talmud, but the part of Chumash Mikra includes Pnimis HaTorah. So that's included in Pasuk. So therefore the Pasuk is also, Mikra is also included in Pnimis HaTorah. Well, there is a gam l'gi'idr gisa. The Shegam b'Sefer HaTanya. That also in the Sefer HaTanya. HaTorah shebiksav the b'Chasidus, that's the written Torah Chasidus, Pnimis HaTorah. Yesh gam inyan sheshayach leberurim. There's also an aspect which has a connection to berurim. So just like Pnimis HaTorah is part of Mikra, the Mikra and Mikra b'chlal nigla, that's berurim. So Mikra Pnimis HaTorah is also shaykh to berurim. Kamin shach leberurim, kamishkos uvad merazokim ba'agedoma. V'gam b'ashar shel Tanya, as the Alter Rebbe writes in the introduction of the Tanya, and it's also in the front page, the gate of the Tanya. Shul miyusad al-posik yikor v'lacha hadover me'oid b'ficha b'vav chalasoisoi. That it's based on the posik, that it's very close to you to love Hashem and to fear Hashem in your mouth and your heart to do it. He's explaining well how it's very close. So what is the Tanya? Inyan of Birur. Hainu shekavona v'atachla is the Sefer HaTanya, not just to talk about godliness, but the purpose of talking about the Sefer HaTanya. This is the Torah Shebiksav of Chassidus. It's also Levayir Echlasoise. So how to be Mekayim the mitzvahs, how to do B'ficha B'vavcha. So you see that Nigla the Torah has an area Of course, that you understand, that you work with it, but it also has the area which is higher than hasoga, which is not mislabish, mivarer. And the same thing in Pnimis HaTorah, while it's Yidiyah Rav Niso, but it's also the purpose, the goal is to bring a person to Avos Hashem and Yiras Hashem, which is the level of Birur. Elo, She'inyan Zeh. So, but generally we divide, Nigla the Torah is considered to be Birur, B'derech Mamata L'maylo, and Chassidus, Pnimis HaTorah is considered to be Mil Maylo Lamata, higher than Birur. This idea we just discussed, that in both parts of Torah, in the Nigla of Torah, in the Pnimis HaTorah, Yeshnam Shnei and Yonim, this is to both in Yonim. Ubeprotius, that's specifically. We say Torah Bichlolus Uprotius, number that I've quoted. In detail, you do. If you take apart, you find within Nigla the Torah both aspects, and within Pnimis Torah both aspects. But when you talk about it generally, Nigla the Torah shayches libirurim uboifim the islapshus. The revealed part of Torah is connected to sorting out in a way of dressing up. The other one is also technically a birur, but it's b'mayla lamata. It's the oir, not the islapshus, but b'derech islapshus. That's Nigla the Torah. B'nimis HaTorah. Ilona the Chai, it's a tree of life. Shalamayla minyan abirurim. It's not dressing up in the birurim. And there is a birur shenasai, the Limude Torah, who should be b'derech islapshus. The birur, the sorting out that takes place through Pnimis HaTorah is not in a way of dressing up, but the oir of Torah is mevarer. Oh. So the Rebbe says that therefore Yaakov Avinu had Milmayla Lamata, gives us a koyach for Milmayla Lamata too, for learning Torah, and both in the Pnimis Torah and Nigla the Torah, because we do have the Maila Mata over there as well. So, but the Rebbe does now the further parallel by Yaakov Avinu. We had first Mevarer Lavan and then Esav, and the same thing is with the study of Chassidus. That the first level is that it helps Birur Hamidus. No, the first fakert. Birur Hamidus comes afterwards. Let's look inside. Just as the birur of Yaakov, because it comes from Malamata, by the revelation of a supreme light, say so the way, since his birur was milmayla lamata, the order was also milmayla lamata. It started with Keser Chocham Bina, then it went to the Midas. That's why Yaakov's birur started with Lavan and then Esav. Shabir Agivu Rishonis, that he sorted out the first three. Keser Chochma Bin Lifnei Shabir Amidas, before he went to Esav to Mavara the Midas. Similarly, it's also in the inner part of Torah. By learning Chassidus with understanding and grasp, Nas and Birur Hamoichin. The Nefesh HaBahamis, he sorts out the Moichin and also the Nefesh HaBahamis. So, but the person first, it's the intellect, and then it's his emotion. That's the birur that is accomplished by the person through the learning of Chassidus. The idea, the idea limit of Avon Vasol Nasa Bitter Hamoichim, Vegam the Nefesh HaBahamis, also the animal soul. Koilel Gam Hamoichim Shalim Milo Mishaychus Lemidas. First, it's the moichin and also nefesh bahamis, which includes the moichin that are higher than midas. Sometimes there's moichin that have a connection. They bring the midas. So that's the second step. That's already called like bidur hamidus. First is moichin. When we say moichin, we mean purely moichin. Even moichin that are higher than midas, that is what's included in the beginning. And nigla goes down to take care of the midas and the moicha shayochim the midas. This is the abiru shai de nigla the Torah who beiker b'hamidas u'b'hamoicha shayochim the midas. The bitter that takes place through nigla the Torah is mainly in the midas, and that is the moicha that have a connection to midas. Mashen kain al de limud pnimis haTorah. But when we talk about learning pnimis haTorah, mikivan she mitzvah rama v'nisoah mitzad atzmo, because of its greatness, it's exalted and raised mitzvah on its own. It's higher than bringing lev shalom. The birur is etzem not only in moichin hashoyachim the midas, not only the moichin as it influences midas, but in the moichin be'etzem. So what we're saying is that pnimis haTorah, just like by Yaakov, first he conquers Lavan, same thing here. Chassidus, we conquer the moichin. And the moichin which have a connection to the midas. And then the nigla, the moichin shechin lamidas, that's the second part going towards Esav already. But through nigla the Torah, you're only doing midas and moichin shechin lamidas. Even though, how are we saying that we're able to be mevarer the moichin be'etzem, not only moichin that are shayches to midas, but the etzem ha-moichin through chassidus, but the conquering of keni knizi v'kadmoni is going to be la'asid lavei, yirak la'asid lavei. Lachar hashleim is the birur hamidas v'hamoichin hashayachim lamidas. That takes place after there's the complete sorting out of midas and the moichin that are shayches to midas. Mikol mokoim, but still me'ein zeh ugam achshav. Some of it is like now also ayidei limud haTorah, through the study of Torah. So basically, by learning Chassidus, you're mevarer, and first and foremost, you're mevarer the moichin and the moichin be'etzem, moichin that are higher than shayches lamidas. Keni knizi v'kadmoni are only la'asid lavei. No, we have the hero that we can do that now too. We have some of it now through living pnimis haTorah. That's what we told about the birur Yaakov. Even though we have to do midas first, generally speaking, but we learn about the birur of Yaakov that he goes first, the mechal the gilu elyon, by the revelation of the elyon. The Gam say that Abir are also learning that he started with Kesser Chochma Bina. He started with love. Why are we learning about it? The Shnei in Yonim Elu and Kechol in Yonim Shabbatayra, because these two aspects that you started with the Kesser Chochma Bina, and it came through a Gilu Elyon, not through his slapshus. It applies to us. How? Although now it's mainly Memat L'maylo. These are eternal lessons, also now, and we have me'enza. When we learn Chassidus, we can be mevarer, and it starts off. Actually, we learn about with the level of moichin, the gimel rishonos, the kesach chacham bin. Okay, so here we're saying that when you learn the Chassidus, you have that level, but basically it's the nigla de Torah, which is the main bitter, bisman hazeh. But we also learn that there is a bitter through an Oir Elyon, which is through the learning of Chassidus, and that's why we learn about Yaakov. And the Rebbe goes further. Tes v'yesh lahoisif da'ha'ira meseder habirurim de Yaakov. This lesson that we have from the birurim of Yaakov, which is Gimel Rishonos L'fnei Zayin Tachtonis, to have the love on the first Keser Chacham Bina before Zayin Tachtonis, Igam B'negeya Lahaseder. The Niglo Pnim Zatoid is telling us what comes first. Niglo Pnim Zatoid. Even though the beginning, when one starts to learn, you start to learn the revealed part of Torah. And in such a way, the Yigia, you have to put an effort. And only later on is the study in the inner part of Torah. What Reb Chaim Vital, as Reb Chaim Vital writes, the Harizal, that the occupation of Allah that the Harizal would learn, Hoya Biyigia was with such an effort, not just learn, but learn with effort that he would sweat the Harizal, Zeya Gedoylo, a big sweat, to break the klippa. And because he was such a great sharp genius, he would look into 6 different pathways in halacha. And then he would start looking in according to the inner part. So first 6 ways according to halacha, and then look into the way it is according to the secret. Still, so we say Nigla comes before Nista. Here we're trying to learn from Yaakov that the level of the Birurim Ilmailo, Torah, Pnimis HaTorah should come before Nigla. So the Rebbe says, Yediyas Inyonim HaYisodim the Pnimis HaTorah. The knowledge of the basic, fundamental ideas of the inner part of Torah, Ba'ofen Shalab Shoch Anocha Pshuta, in a way that it's just obviously lying there. You accept that. Which is beyond understanding. That needs to be even before you can study the revealed part of Torah. Because when you have the acceptance and the simple taking of the inner part of Torah, even before, which is higher than understanding, before you learn Nigla Torah, that brings about that even when you learn the revealed part and the sorting up which you accomplish through it, is on a higher level. If you start off with the Avodah of Yaakov Lavan first, which is the Anoch and Pnimis HaTorah, then the rest of the Birurim are on a greater level. What's the idea? Why so? What happens here? Well, the Nigla the Torah, who Bichlal Bagbola. Nigla the Torah, generally speaking, is limited. Upnimius HaTorah B'Ligvul, the knowledge, the inner part of Torah has no limit. By day, the Yisoinyon in the Pnimis HaTorah. So when you know the aspects of the inner part of Torah in a way that simple acceptance canal, balachas kama v'kama lidei halimud the pnimis haTorah b'avonim v'asoga, and how much more so when you learn the inner part of Torah and you do understand it and grasp. Ubefrat kshalimud gufa, especially when you're learning. Ki yarchiv Hashem is gevulcha. God widens your territory, your limitation. So you learn it in a wide way. Lemailo lemedida v'agbola, beyond measure and limitation. What does it mean practically? You're not looking at the time, that you're learning it without limitation. You're so deeply involved that you're learning it fully. You're not considering the time. Are you still in the time of the Seder, or you're after you finish Seder? You're still involved in it. That means that you're learning it in a way of beyond measure. So through this, so even the study of Nigla is in a way which is higher than any measure of limitation. Normally, Nigla has a limitation, but you are able to get the higher level because you started off with the Pnimiyus HaTorah, which has no limitation, even just by accepting and or learning, certainly, and in a way of Yarchiv. So then also the sorting out that takes place through the revealed part of Torah. Even though it's a bitter in a way of dressing up, it's in a way that is greater. Yud. So now, that turns out now that you're learning Pnimis HaTorah in order for it to make your revealed part of Torah better, more successful, make it blik vul as your Nigla Torah. Seems like that it's a bringing down the level of Pnimis HaTorah. And the Rebbe is going to address that. He says, no, because that's the Kavanah, so that is okay. The Rebbe continues in Ois Yud. Hine, Hagam dezeh mashal de limud pnimis haTorah nasi yisrim benimud hanigla. The fact that through learning pnimis haTorah, this brings an advantage to the study of the nigla, ubabiru shal dezeh, and the sorting out that takes place through that story. Ulchede inyan shel yirida, that seems to be a descent legabal limud de pnimis haTorah, k'moshu mitzad atzmid, and learning Torah on its own. Mitzvah v'nisah. Alpha became, but still, Mekivan Shashleim was the Dira B'Tachtonim. Since the completeness of making a dwelling place in the lower world, that the Tachten on its own should become a Klele Lukus, not because of a light that shines, but in its own. The Inyan Zehu Dafkali, the Abiru Shabbaderich Slapshus. That idea comes specifically through sorting out when you dress up kinal sivhei. Yashleimer, we can say the idei ha'amshoche, the pnimis haTorah, the nigla the Torah. When you bring down pnimis haTorah and the nigla the Torah, which is the ligvul of pnimis haTorah into the nigla the Torah, shayoda nasi yisrim belimud hanigra, that brings about an advantage in the limud nigla, and the accomplishment of the sorting out of the limud nigla, then the primis haTorah is actually elevated more than it was on its own, without being effective and being responsible for the addition of in the nigla the Torah. Yud Aleph. V'zehu Vechol Bonoyich Limude Hashem B'Rav Shleim Bonoyich. Vechol Bonoyich Limude Havaya, says the Afin B'Ad Araisa Da Havaya, those who study the Torah of Hashem, that's the Limude Havaya. Humaylis Limude HaTorah. That is the advantage of learning Torah. Now, not just Torah, Ubefrat Pnimis HaTorah. Araisa Da Havaya. We're talking about Torah of Hashem, which is Pnimis HaTorah. K'moshi mitzad atzma, that's on its own. Rav Shleim Bonoyich, al tikra Bonoyich ala Bonoyich, hu inyan habirur ba'olam shal de'esek HaTorah. That's the accomplishment of the Torah that in the world, that it creates shalom in the world, and that's the accomplishment of Torah in the world. V'kivon shal yidei zeh habiru shal yidei sek Torah nase aliyas haTorah mikmoishim sadatzmai, and that's why, since the Esek HaTorah is what brings about in Olam, how does the Rav Shloim Bonoyich, through the Vechol Bonoyich Limuday Hashem, Lachein Mevayer Mesayim BaMamer, that's why the Mamer explains and concludes, Shal Yidei Ha'inyan de Bonoyich, through the idea of your builders, Banoyim Ha'iskim B'minyones Shaloydom, the builders who are occupied in building the world, Yekuyam Gam Bahem V'Talmidei Chachamim Atzmon, should be fulfilled also by them. Rav Shloim Bonoyich, there's the higher level because they brought it down that the Shalom should be in the Bonoyich, as the Frierdiker Rebbe brings down in the end of the Maimon that the Rebbe quoted before, and the Rebbe concludes with this, that because they bring the Shalom Bonoyich, so there's also an advantage in the Esek HaTorah, in their birur, in the Pnimis HaTorah, on their own, because that is the Dir B'tach Torah.